Welcome to Tomorrow Cities podcast, a series of conversations on urbanization and disaster risk reduction created by the Tomorrow Cities Hub, a 5-year interdisciplinary research project working internationally to foster a transition from crisis management to multi-hazard risk-informed urban planning in cities of the Global South. In this episode, Dr. Thaisa Comelli talks to Professor Alphonse Kyessi, Dr. Tatu Limbumba and Dr. Guido Uhinga from Ardhi University in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Drawing upon their experience from working in the city, our guests discuss the urbanization and risk challenges in the region and provide insights from direct engagement with Mianzini's community, a fast-growing informal settlement of Dar es Salaam.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this podcast episode. My name is Thaisa Comelli. I am a senior research fellow at University College London, and in Tomorrow Cities, I am the social sciences coordinator and technical lead. And today I am hosting this episode, and the episode is about engaging with informality for equitable future risk reduction. And we're basically going to explore urbanization and risk challenges in the context of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, focusing on how to engage with informality and diverse community groups when we are discussing and trying to reduce future risk. And today I have with me Professor Wilbard Kombe, Professor Alphonse Kyessi, Dr. Tatu Limbumba, and Dr. Guido Uhinga. They're all from Ardhi University, my esteemed colleagues from Ardhi University, and we have collaborating with them in the context of Tomorrow Cities. I'm very happy to be with you today. If you can say a little hello to us.
Hello, thank you very much, Thaisa. Yeah, welcome.
Hello, glad.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, Guido. So I'm going to give you the word in a minute so you can introduce yourselves with more detail. But before that, I'm going to start by laying out some interesting facts and information about Dar es Salaam. So some of these facts will help us to grasp both the present and the future challenges that the city faces and will face towards the future. So Dar es Salaam is popularly known as the harbor or haven of peace. And then you can correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues.
You're right.
Thank you on the most appropriate translation. And Dar es Salaam is the largest city in Tanzania with a population of approximately 7 million people. This is projected to reach over 50 million by 2060. So it's a huge change in population size. The city is the commercial and industrial capital of Tanzania, contributing to 17% of the national GDP. The economy is characterized by a large informal sector. From the perspective of housing and infrastructure, this is also true. So informal settlements in Tanzania house more than 70% of the urban population. The city faces significant infrastructure deficits, including water and sanitation, with only 50% of the population having access to piped water and less than 10% to piped sewage. Now, in Tomorrow Cities, we work within the context of rapid urbanization, which in the case of Dar es Salaam has led, and in many Global South contexts, has led to environmental degradation, including air and water pollution, and increased risk of flooding, especially for poor and marginalized communities. And speaking of poverty and marginalization, we do have high poverty rates in Dar es Salaam, with approximately 20% of the informal sector workforce engaged in street vending, for example. We also have a lot of inequality in Dar es Salaam, with 84% of the population clustered in the lowest wealth quintile and 0.3% only in the wealthiest. The city has a unique governance structure. I'm going to ask Professor Kyessi to talk a little bit about that in a second. But basically, Dar is consisted of 5 relatively independent districts. Now I'm going to make a mess with the pronunciation, but I will do my best. So we have Kinondoni in the north, Ilala in the center, Ubungo and Temeke in the south. We are working in Temeke. We're going to talk about that today. And Kigamboni in the east across the Kurasini estuary. So In Tomorrow's Cities, as I just said, we are working with the Temeke municipality and Dar es Salaam. Before I finish that, I should mention that Dar es Salaam has been the focus of several high-profile interventions aimed at improving urban governance and planning, including some World Bank urban resilience programs and the Dar Metropolitan Development projects. So these are some of the initiatives that we can try and tap into for improved impact. And we're going to be talking about impact in the context of future risk reduction today. So that's a brief introduction just for those who are hearing us today and don't know much about DAR. They can maybe picture the context in their minds and kind of understand a little bit why we have been working in this area. So now I will hand over to Professor Kyessi and ask you to please share a little bit about your experience working with urban governance in Dar es Salaam. So based on this introduction that I just gave, what is your experience? What is the challenge that you see in terms of urban governance, and thoughts that you have about, what are the unique aspects about urban governance in the context of Dar es Salaam, and making connections, if possible, with, participatory, future-oriented risk reduction activities. Over to you, Professor Kyessi.
Thank you very much, Thaisa. My name is Professor Alphonse Kyessi. I'm an associate research professor at the Institute of Human Settlement Studies, Ardhi University. I've been working at Ardhi University for a couple of years, starting 1993, and working there as full-time, but now I'm working as a part-time researcher. Of course, also research, teaching, as well as especially postgraduate studies. I would say that I started with working with the City Council of Dar es Salaam for a couple of years, 13 years, way back in 1980 up to 1992. And I was an urban planner. I'm an urban planner by profession, and I was the town planner in charge there. And then after coming back to Ardhi University as a researcher, I've been still working with the City of Dar es Salaam for all those years, doing a lot of research, consultant services, and also advising the government in terms of policy analysis. I will say that also I've been teaching at the Ardhi University in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, and also teaching at the Architecture Department. And also we are at the Institute, also we are running several courses at master's level and PhD. Most of them are focusing on policy issues, focusing on urban management, urban governance. And I would say that as you have just introduced the City of Dar es Salaam, the City of Dar es Salaam is the largest city in Tanzania. I would normally say that is most of the people are actually the wealth. More than 70% of the capital of revenue, which is generated in the country, is actually generated in Dar es Salaam. And it is a city, I would say that is not really a city, it's now a metropolitan city, because it has got 4 municipalities, and 1 city. The Ilala city, it was used to be a municipality, but now is a city of its own. And then we have the 4 other municipalities, which is Kinondoni, Ubungo, Temeke, and Kigamboni. It is governed by municipality level, by municipal governance. We have municipalities, and each municipality and the city have their own local administration governance structures, which means they have elected councillors, and also they have a director, a municipal director and city director. And there are several wards in each municipality or in each city. And at the lowest level, we have the mtaa. That's the structure of the city. And I will say that most of it is, as Thaisa just said, it is urbanizing informally. We have a lot of informal urbanization in terms of settlements, in terms of pet trading, in terms of practices, and so forth. And of course, although we have, as I said earlier, the economy of the city is high, according to the statistics which are available. And it is abandoned fast. And I would say that we have a lot of challenges as well, because it is a coastal city. Is a municipality which is located along the Indian coast, and we have experiencing what we call seawater rise, climate change, heat waves, but of course also a lot of flooding because of infrastructures which are not adequate. We have inadequate infrastructure, especially central solar systems. We don't have adequate stormwater drainage systems, and of course the people depend on pit latrines. Most of the sanitation services are pit latrines. In a nutshell, that is what we have for the city of Dar es Salaam. And most of the people are staying in informal settlements, which of course occupy about 50% of the land, but about 75%, up to 80% of the population are staying in these informal settlements. In a nutshell, that is what is Dar es Salaam.
Thank you so much, Professor Kyessi. That was a great overview of the city and its challenges and the complexity also of the city. I guess you outlined that really well. So I would like to move on to the more specific site where we have been working. So we're working, I think I said that in the beginning, we're working in the municipality of Temeke in this site called Mianzini. So for those who don't know Tomorrow City so well, I should start by explaining that there are several different contexts where we work across the 9 cities where we have developed the Tomorrow Cities decision support environment. So we usually want to focus on places that are ongoing rapid urbanization and that are significantly exposed to natural hazards such as floods and landslides. And Professor Kyessi also mentioned all other phenomena such as heat waves and sea level rise. And of course, it might be that some of the places where we work are not too exposed in the present because there are no human settlements there at the moment, or those settlements are not very dense, so they're not catalyzing a lot of hazard activity, but they could be more exposed in the future because of changes in climate and because of the changes in the way that these hazards are operating. So this means that we often work in places that are not necessarily urban. So when we're talking about informality, there may be an image emerging in your heads about, settlements that are very dense. They're concentrating a lot of population, but actually many times in Tomorrow Cities, we work in rural or peri-urban areas that are expected to be urban, and therefore they deserve the attention of participatory risk-informed planning exercises, because we could be helping the way in which these settlements are developing. So we could reduce this process of risk accumulation through processes of urbanization. And Mianzini is one of such places. So it's a peri-urban area. And I would like to paint a picture now to those who are listening to the podcast about what Mianzini looks like and the challenges that are specific to Mianzini. So I'll continue with you, Professor Kyessi. Can you tell us about what is unique in Mianzini? What urbanization patterns and current and future risks do you see there? And in other words, why did we choose to work in Mianzini?
Yeah, thank you very much, Thaisa. I would say that Mianzini is one of the wards in Temeke municipality, which has got several wards, but we'll say that this Mianzini ward is a replica of other wards which are experiencing several disasters during when we have some rains, when we have heavy downpour. But also Mianzini is a peri-urban area, which is we can say it is also have some informal settlements is actually formally developed, but most of it very small area which is planned, and the planned area is actually industrial area, which is very close to that area, that site. But mostly it is a peri-urban area where we have where we are experiencing what we call landslides. Also, we are experiencing flooding during the rains. And sometimes also we can say that because the area, part of it is densely developed, then we may experience some fire and so forth. But I will say that it is about more than 30 kilometers from the city center of Dar es Salaam, metropolitan city, and it is located along the highway going to the south, going to Kilwa, and administratively the mtaa, the ward, which is divided in 4 mtas. Mtaa is the smallest unit of local government administration in Tanzania in urban areas. And normally is like, we can say the neighborhood, is like a neighborhood. That is normally a mtaa, which normally must have at least 5,000 people and above. And in this Mianzini, we have 4 ward. We have 4 mitas: Mianzini itself, Machinjioni, Maji Matitu, and Mpanda. These are the 4 what you call mtas which are forming the ward. The ward has got a population about 72,000 people by the last census of 2022, and we'll say that is rapidly expanding. As if we go to the area now, we find actually we have experiencing a lot of development and planned development taking place. Parceling, land is being parceled and being sold. So densification is taking place, but at the same time, we can say that Mianzini was chosen to be for this study of TCD. SE approach to apply the TCD approach in this area, because first, to be able to achieve goal number 11 of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is geared towards a livable city, but also at the same time goal number 3 and goal number 13, which are very much related to the issue of climate change and the risks, hazards. And we'll say that the situation of selection of Mianzini suits the study, because we have experiencing in this area climate change issues related to flooding, but also landslides. And it is good that one day when we are walking the settlement, it was raining, and we would actually experience the flooding in that area, and also some landslides, especially near the river. There are some rivers which are cutting across the settlement, Mianzini River, and you find actually those houses which are located near the rivers actually have experiencing landslides, destruction because of landslides. But of course, on the areas which are flat areas, part of the area, we're experiencing flooding because there are no stormwater drainage in the area. Are not provided. We don't have stormwater drainage systems in the area. It's an formally developed area. But as well, and of course, we don't have, as I said, in this settlement, we have pit latrines, which are actually mainly the sanitation systems being used there. Apart from some people using septic tanks, but the pit latrines are also dominating the area. We can say on-site sanitation system is the major aspect there. But we can also say that in the settlement itself, it was selected because I say most of the people who are there, we can say low-income people, low-income people getting spending about $2 per day per capita per person. And that is very low according to the standards, the UN standards. And we can also say that people are practicing informal pet trading. Informal businesses are the ones which are actually carried out in the center. Most of the women and also the men especially are involved in this kind of pet trading activities for their livelihoods. And I would say that Mianzini was selected because after going around the Temeke municipality, looking into areas which are experience some floods, experience flooding, or have some problems of landslides or risks like fire. Mianzini was actually selected, was actually picked, and this was picked after our discussions with the municipal director, the mayor of Temeke, and some of the technical people in the area. We had to visit some settlements there, and including Mianzini, and we found actually Mianzini was the suitable for this kind of research, and that's why we picked Mianzini as a testing ground for the project, for the Tomorrow Cities Decision Support Environment approach.
Thank you, Professor Kyessi. So before we continue, and I would like to talk a little bit more, you started talking about, the social composition of Mianzini and the kind of work and income activities that we see happening there. But before that, I would like to touch a little bit more on the urbanization trends and the infrastructural challenges that you mentioned. So we have talked a little bit about informality in the beginning. So I would like you to tell me in a very short sentence, if possible, would you characterize Mianzini as an informal settlement or a place that is undergoing a process of informal urbanization? And if so, why? So what are the key processes that you would use to characterize this as a space that is marked by informality? And I ask this because you mentioned processes of land regularization, for example, and there is a lot of effort from the municipality to urbanize the settlement in an organized fashion. But at the same time, we see some characteristics that are typical of informal settlements. So if you could talk a little bit about that before we continue, I think that would provide more clarity to those who are listening to us today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thaisa. Mianzini, we can say, is a typical informal settlement which is located in the peri-urban area of Dar es Salaam, and of course also even with within the municipality itself. It is also in the peri-urban, the southern part of the municipality, and it is informal because ongoing, which are geared towards regularizing the area, but we can say that people are still, we can say, parceling because they don't have titles. They are still parceling the land which they have and selling it to those people are seeking for plots, and subdividing and continue subdividing. And as I said, it is in the peri-urban area. Part of it is not well developed. So parceling is ongoing, and selling your plots is ongoing. But of course,
is it a private process? So like the parceling is happening by private agents, or is this something that is somehow supported by the government?
No. It's purely private. Any individual who has got a plot can actually divide at will and sell at will at any time. And but as I said, at the moment, there's the ongoing regularization process, which is ongoing, means identifying the properties of the owners of the land, and trying to see on how they can now obtain residential license or titles for their properties. And this is what is going on. It means that is an informal area which is undergoing a process of regularization in terms of formalizing the area, so that people can obtain titles for land, tenure security for their land. But of course, informality is not only from the land, but also informality in terms of the activities which are being performed in the area, in terms of businesses like pet trading, which is also ongoing informally.
Thank you so much. That was very clear. So it's good that you mentioned pet trading again, and I guess that's a good segue for us to talk a little bit the social composition of Mianzini. So I would like to discuss now in more detail the production of the urban scenarios that we are working with. And those urban scenarios in the Tomorrow Cities methodology will be exposed to potential future hazards. So that's a key part of our methodology. And if you listen to our previous episodes, and I recommend that you do so, you will have seen that those scenarios, they're not those future urban scenarios for Mianzini and for the other cities that we work with. They're not just hypothetical plans. They're not just hypothetical versions of futures for those areas. They are expressions of the aspirations of different groups that we work with. So for every city that is engaged with Tomorrow Cities, we have different groups. Those groups will produce urban scenarios, and those scenarios will be exposed to future hazards. That's a key part of the methodologies. So those groups, in turn, they are meant to express key social inequalities and aspects of social vulnerability that we identify in the sites where we work. So for every city, we will have one scenario that's representing a group, and that group is representing urban inequalities in turn. That's the logic of it. Now I would like to move to Dr. Tatu, and would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about those different social or urban groups that were selected for the exercise in Mianzini? So what are those groups, first of all? Why were these groups chosen? So what is the rationale for choosing those groups? And what interesting insights did you gain from engaging with them in the Tomorrow Cities project?
Thank you, Thaisa. Hello, everyone. My name is Tatu Limbumba. I'm from Ardhi University. I work with the Institute for Human Settlement Studies as a senior research fellow. I am an urban planner by profession, and my key areas of research are informality, housing, gender, and issues related to climate change. So in answer to Thaisa's question, it's quite true what she said earlier, that these groups and whatever work that they did were expressions of the social inequalities and the social and the spatial inequalities in Mianzini. Now, in the process, we talked first to local leaders and the municipality officials, because they are in touch with the population and they also know what the needs of the population are. And they gave us a list of the types of groups, vulnerable groups that are living in Mianzini. So having selected them, we came up with 4 disaggregated groups. These were elderly, influential persons, the youth, but we also looked at persons who lived in the floodplain, residents who lived in the floodplain, and we had a group of local leaders and experts. Now, before we went into the main workshop session, we had a pre-workshop meeting just to meet the members and kind of confirm the challenges from their own voices. And during this process, we realized that we had missed out on tenants, because these are some of the challenges that were expressed during this meeting. So we also included tenants into the residents group, so that they could also give us our experiences on how it was like to live as a tenant in these floodplain areas. So why were these groups chosen? We had the influential elderly persons groups, because apart from it being a vulnerable group living in Mianzini, they had local experiential knowledge of Mianzini. We also had another group, the youth group. We chose this youth group because most of the youth are involved in informal income-generating activities, like what's been discussed earlier. They have these activities in open spaces and in the streets. These are the places that they carry out these activities. But when it comes to disasters, for instance, it rains and there's flooding, most of them stop having these activities because they are on the these open areas. So we thought that this is also a group to be involved. It was a mix of young women and men. The other group, the persons living in flood risk areas, the idea here was to express what it was like to live in a floodplain areas. So these are some of the spatial inequalities that have been touched upon. These are the groups that are most affected by the floods, and any future plans that we might have had or the residents might have involved demolition or resettlement. So this is something that might affect them negatively. We had the local leaders, and we chose the local leaders because this is the group that comprises experts, professionals, planners, for instance, but also local leaders who know some of the regulations and policies that are down at this level. We say that these experts provide, they have expert knowledge, but also local leaders have political power that might be able to influence the changes that the different disaggregated groups in Mianzini might express, the solutions that they might express. So, so far, these are the reasons why we chose the groups, Thaisa.
Thank you so much. So I would like to talk a little bit about, if you have it from the top of my head, the key commonalities and the differences between the visions that were produced by these different groups. So the rationale for selecting the groups, as we know, is that each group will produce a vision, and hopefully that vision will be infused by those different experiences that we're trying to capture by selecting those different groups. And those visions will eventually become scenarios. So we know that sometimes when we're asking people, what does a good future Mianzini looks like, a lot of similar statements will emerge. And then when we go into the co-design, co-planning exercises, when people actually have to produce plans and policies that reflect their visions, and those plans and policies will become urban scenarios eventually. That's part of the methodology. So we will see those aspirations emerging in very tangible ways. Mm-hmm. So, and I was there in Dar with you, so I remember that we saw some similarities and some differences across the groups. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that from your memory and to the best of your recollection.
Okay, thank you. Of course, because these residents came from Mianzini, they were all low-income persons, low-income residents. They all wished for a modernized Mianzini with, for instance, tarmac access roads, street lights for safety, stormwater drainage to address flooding. And these expressions came from their lived experiences and the challenges that they faced. Some other similarities were plans or maps that expressed areas for enhancing economic employment opportunities, of course, most of which were informal, but at least they contributed to these enhancing of their livelihoods, but also creation of open spaces. All age groups and all the groups thought it was very important to have these open spaces and recreation areas, which are often missed out in congested informal settlements. But in terms of differences across the groups, remember we had 4 groups. There was a tendency among the youth to prefer issues that were related to a modern lifestyle. Of course, improved access. They thought that ICT in an area or a resident area that was facilitated by ICT facilities represented a modern life. Now, the youth were also inclined to talk about a private life, such as distinct accommodation rather than a communal lifestyle that is common for many informal settlements, like having individual plots, having individual housing units, etc. So these are some of the things that came out of the youth groups. Now, unlike the youth groups, we had the elderly groups, and their preferences was on collective interests, such as having common spaces for communal use, which were also fast fading away when you have these informal subdivisions like the ones that Professor Kyessi was talking about. So they were more inclined to having plans or solutions that also fostered a communal lifestyle. And then we had the group that was living in the low-lying areas. Their key concern was securing their properties. Remember, their properties were often destroyed, etc., during flooding. They were damaged. So they were thinking of how can we secure properties from floods and landslides. But they also recognized that this point of securing properties would probably also lead to some resettlement or displacement. So these areas were also planned for. So this was the difference. The leaders group were, like I said earlier, on the communal lifestyle, but they're also inclined to think about solutions that protected and improved public goods, such as the open areas, the schools, health facilities, access roads, and stormwater drainage. So these are some of the things that the leaders group talked about. Of course, when we had the expert group, they were more inclined towards ensuring that all these plans did not go against some of the policies and regulations that were at municipal and at ward level. So in a nutshell, these were some of the similarities and differences of the visioning exercise and solutions.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful for us to picture what the different urban scenarios look like. As in the podcast, we cannot show them. So at least you provided us with a very clear picture of those key differences. And that's very important because we use those scenarios to model them against future hazards. So each scenario, each version of a good urban future, each plan with a set of policies will have different consequences when it comes to risk. And that's what I'm going to talk about now with my colleagues. So thank you very much, Tatu, for that contribution. I would like to move now to this learning component of tomorrow's cities that I just mentioned. So we don't want to only gather people's inputs on what is desired. So we don't want to create a wish list for the future, for those long-term futures. And we also want those different groups and the institutional actors. So Tatu mentioned the participation of the ward level representatives. And we want these actors to learn together and exchange knowledge through this process, through this journey with tomorrow's cities. And a key part of this journey is learning and allowing an opportunity for people to explore the consequences of their decision-making. So in tomorrow's cities, this happens through the stages of hazard and impact modeling and through the stage of risk agreement. So we call risk agreement because it's having a common understanding of what risk means in the specific context of that specific community. So impacts are objective, but risk can be a subjective concept that is created through the engagement with tomorrow's cities. So we do that learning exercise through an interactive web app. So that's a digital tool that we created where we can see for every urban scenario, the different impacts that stem from those different spatial and policy changes that people have proposed towards the future. And all of this happens in a safe learning environment where people get to learn from each other's ideas, they get to test their own ideas, and it's not really about understanding who did better or worse in terms of the consequences, but really like what were the choices that led to different consequences and how can we absorb learning and bring that learning into our decision-making environments. So now I'll move to Guido. Guido, thank you for coming today. Could you introduce yourself and share some reflections on the key lessons from the modeling work in Dar es Salaam? I know you have been very involved in there, in like collecting data, modeling the hazards, and also communicating the results of the modeling work to the community groups and engaging in this process of learning together. So what did you learn with this process? What do you think that the communities learned? And what would you like to share to us in terms of learning and exchange?
Hello, Thaisa. Thank you very much. My name is Guido Uhinga. I'm working with the Ardhi University, Department of Geospatial Sciences and Technology as a lecturer, but I'm also a director of the ICT of the university. My experience in learning with, working with the TCDSC in the modeling part, one of the thing which I have learned that, okay, if you want to actually do the modeling, you need to have enough data, particularly the spatial data, but also the social, economic sort of data. And if you have them, it's easy then to structure them so much so that you can use in the modeling part. But if you actually lack the data, it may take you a very long time to actually either collect the data or process from other sources. So you end up into wasting a lot of time in getting the data. But I also learned while working with the communities, I learned that the communities, they know their challenges, because we sometimes think that the communities know nothing about what is happening in the areas, but in actual sense, what I've learned that the communities, they know their challenges. And if they are persuaded, they can actually be able to participate in seeking for solutions which could reduce the problems existing in their areas. But I also learned that working with the communities, it needs strong commitment from the municipalities and the communities themselves. Because if you don't get enough, or if you don't get a strong commitment from the authorities like the municipality, the government, I mean, the director and the mayor, you may end up into having a lot of problems. And for us, we had very good cooperation with the municipality management, and the communities were also eager to participate, and that was very good in our process. But in terms of the communities, which I have seen that they have learned through the process, that they actually, when we started engaging them, they were hesitant into participating to the process, and they thought the process is, it can only be done by the technocrats, and they could not be involved. But the use of the visual sort of tools like maps, it helped them to actually be able to understand, to easily understand the process and be able to participate fully in the TCDSE process. For instance, when we started, we used that concept, Thaisa, of the brief of my life, so that they could tell their story, the past, present, and the future. So it was easy for them to use the story of a river, and it's like a sketch, so they could actually participate and say how it was, how the Mianzini was by then, how it is as of now, and what are their wishes and aspirations. So it was easy for them to follow. And the other thing which I have actually learned from the communities is that the communities, they were able to participate in terms of spatial planning process, because spatial planning, it looks as if it's only for technocrats, as I said before. But once they were engaged in that process, they found themselves that it is easy for them to participate and be able to actually say what they want or what they aspire, and finally be able to translate those stories into a map-like form. So they actually participated into producing those vision scenarios or land use plans, which they could not think about it before. And as I said, they were hesitant into producing those maps. But again, what I can talk about the communities, what they learned, that they have realized, because if you talk to them, you could see that they have realized that there is a danger or risk of what they are doing today, because their actions and decisions of today, they actually defines their future in terms of whether environmental hazards or even other related hazards. So they at least understood finally that, okay, because when they went through telling about what had happened, how the Mianzini was and how it is now, then they were saying that had it been that we knew about this, we could have taken measures by then. And if the measures were taken by then, we could not be having these hazards which we are having now. So at least they realized that. And also the other thing which they learned and they could share with us that their involvement in the Mianzini settlement was necessary because you could see that usually planners, they actually collect data and they go, whether they make land use maps or they do the squat upgrading without their fully involvement. And in this process, they actually saw that being involved from the beginning, it brought a lot of issues which technocrats could not actually see them had it been that they were not involved, because they had that experience of how the Mianzini was, how it is, and what might unveil or might entail in the future. So basically, their participation was very good, and they actually realized that there is a need to participate in such kind of spatial planning processes, so much so that they can bring in board their experiences about the area, particularly when you talk about the hazards. You need to know how the hazards were happening by then and how are they happening currently, so much so that you can take them into the future plans. And that is what I have actually learned, that they really finally realized that role, which they did not realize before. So this is about what I have learned and what I can see the communities learned about it. But apart from that, there were some challenges as well in terms of how the entire process happened and what I can talk about the challenges. I can see that one of the challenge, as we experts, as I said before, that to do the spatial planning, to do the modeling, you need a lot of maps, and there were limited availability of data because we did not have topographic maps and so forth. So it was difficult for us to start going. But in terms of the communities, some of the challenges which I noticed is for them to understand some of the terms when you talk about the disasters. They could understand about the hazards, but when you talk about the risks, or when you talk about the vulnerability, or when you talk about the impacts and impact matrices, it wasn't easy for them to understand. So we took a lot of time to get them to understand. The other thing is the interpretation of the results, because in Dar es Salaam we did, in terms of modeling, we did flood modeling, but we also did susceptibility, landslide susceptibility mapping. So in terms of landslide mapping, you could see that we ended up into having high, medium, and low susceptible areas. And for them, it wasn't easy to understand when you talk about high, medium, and low, what does it mean, and what precautions they can take. So we had to take a lot of time into getting into that. But the other thing is, in terms of when we were working on with the dashboard, in terms of getting to know those impact matrices and be able to comprehend them and use them to actually either change partially the areas or to actually change the policies. And it was good that we used the dashboard because without the dashboard, it could be very difficult for them to understand. And sometimes they thought, when you talk about the impact matrices, like the number of workers unemployed or the number of households will have no access to hospital or school, they were thinking about today, or they were thinking about now. So we had to explain to them that, okay, these are the impacts of your decisions, of your land use plans, which you have made today for the next 30 years. If these land uses are to be implemented, they are. So these will be the impacts. So we are not talking about the impacts of the situation as of today, but we are talking about the impacts of if your decisions, if your land uses are implemented in 30 years, this is what will actually entail. And the other thing is, which I see the challenge, and is the time, particularly during the risk agreement workshop, because we had one day, and the communities, they were supposed to, in those groups, they were supposed to at least practice and get to feel how the matrices appears when you change the scenarios. So it wasn't easy because some of them, they're not computer literate. So we could not actually engage them properly simply because the time was limited, and they were able to practice in a whether 2 or 3 people were able to practice, but not the entire groups. These are some of the issues which I wanted to share. Thaisa.
Thank you so much, Guido. That was such a comprehensive statement. I really appreciate it. You mentioned many things that are really relevant for us. I guess the first thing that I captured that was really important is this challenge of working in data scarce environments. This is a topic that we have been working a lot through in Tomorrow Cities, and hopefully this is something that we can grasp in more detail in future episodes of this podcast. You also mentioned the need for engagement from different parties. So not working only with communities, which is, of course, should be at the center of the process, but also forming good partnerships with a local government and different sectors that are involved in risk reduction and of course, planning. You also mentioned this need to engage with communities and institutional actors in different stages of the process. So not just about gathering inputs and, us as planners interpreting that and taking the work forward, but really planning together, learning together, and sharing those lessons in meaningful ways together. So it's really a journey. It's not a one-off method of community or stakeholder engagement. I was curious also because you talked about how communities learned on how their decisions led to specific impacts, and this is all happening in the future in a safe space where we can discuss future decisions. This is not immediate impact, and that puts us in a good position to learn. I was wondering if, I know it might be difficult to remember it now, but if you have a recollection of specific decisions that you saw that people learned from them, or if you saw any specific perceptions about risk changing or deepening because of the exercise, or any concepts that you saw that were grasped really well. So do you have any anecdotes to share, like any illustrative examples, so we can understand in more detail what we're talking about? Just a very brief anecdote will do.
Thank you, Thaisa. During the process, particularly when they were trying to make their land use maps or vision scenarios, then while they were discussing, then they said, okay, look, we have to have spaces for drainage channels, or we have to have spaces which are close to whether river. We can reserve them as whether agricultural or green areas. And while they were saying that, or while they were doing that, then they were actually saying, even this area, we have to look at, because it hasn't yet been settled. There are no settlements. So we have to make sure that these areas, we don't allow many other people to settle, because otherwise it will lead into floods. And that is what they were saying. If they knew they knew something like this by then, they could be the watchdogs, because within that area, people were, it's an informal area, and you can see that someone can just sell his or her land through the local leaders, and the communities around, they cannot say anything, because you can see that a person can sell, can parcel his land close to the river, along the valley, the areas which, if they protected, the other people could not be affected. So things like those, they were actually arguing themselves that, okay, they were not aware enough, and they were not proactive to prevent such kind of issues. But they were also saying in some areas you have drainage channels, but some of the people, they actually dump solid wastes, and they don't clean the solid wastes close to the rain seasons. So they were even saying themselves that, okay, now we need to make sure that the small drainages we have are cleaned before the rain seasons, so that we don't end up into getting a lot of floods in this area. So these are some of the issues which you could see that they are now better off, and they can be proactive to making sure that they take some actions which minimize the impacts of the flooding problems which they always face during rain seasons.
Thank you so much, Guido, for sharing this example. That was really rich. And now I would like to go back to you, Tatu and Kyessi, to discuss a very important topic. I'm conscious of the time. I hope we don't have a very long episode, but I still want to talk about impact. This is such an important thing for tomorrow's cities. So we know that these exercises that Guido was describing with future methods, they are very useful for learning and awareness raising. And Guido just illustrated why this is so important, changing the way people think about the way in which certain decisions lead to risk in different ways. But this is a learning exercise that happens in the future. So we're talking about scenarios, potential, possible scenarios for the future. And we want to achieve concrete impact from the Tomorrow Cities works. And that ultimately means changing the way in which we make decisions routinely. So processes of risk accumulation and maldistribution of risk, so these processes can be broken to a large extent. So having experienced the Tomorrow Cities methodology and having engaged with both community and institutional actors as part of this process, what are your views on the potentials for impact that we now have in Dar es Salaam? So how can we positively impact Mianzini, this site where we worked? Or do you see implementation challenges and opportunities there? And what about the opportunities to replicate or bring this method to other spaces in Dar es Salaam or to other scales? What are the next steps? So let's use impact to think about these tricky questions. So maybe I can start with you, Tatu, because you have been involved with the discussions with the national government in Dodoma and other institutional actors. Do you have any thoughts to share regarding impact?
Thank you, Thaisa. Regarding impact, maybe I can borrow from the workshop that we had in Dodoma with the institutional key stakeholders, including people from Mianzini. We presented the process to them, and the reception was very well received. And it's because there are some gaps in our land use planning activities. And most of them are carried out using conventional approaches, sometimes regardless of whether the area is planned or not planned. Most of the time it is top down. But to realize that the TCDC process brought to the table these different stakeholders. And like we said, I think we've talked about this in our report, that there is an opportunity for anchoring this approach onto the regularization approach that is happening now. Hazards are being considered when regularization activities are being done and planned for in informal settlements. So we think that we might have a hybrid model that accommodates some of the principles from the TCDSC or the Tomorrow Cities process and some of the processes that are now being used for regularization. For instance, in the current regularization process, they have what is called a land suitability analysis, to see how the suitability of this land. So we think that the TCDSC process can anchor onto that because this suitability analysis gives, or rather it provides for risk hazard considerations. But the only thing that is missing is how you can project future hazards. So this is an area that TCDSC process can assist, and we think that is a very significant impact.
Thank you, Tatu. Any compliments, Kyessi?
Yes, I would like to say that after actually presenting the TCD approach and the tool at the national level in Dodoma, we found actually there are a lot of opportunities which are available through implementing this process. This process and tool and utilizing the approach. And we will say that, but of course, the major opportunities, what Dr. Tatu just said, that there's an ongoing regularization, land regularization tenure hybrid, we call them hybrid. But this hybrid process which they are using, as she said, that they are actually working on what we call they're like collecting data and analysis and all this, but actually they are not including what you call future risks. And that is where we thought that our TCD could be anchored there, and we agreed that probably we need now to have a discussion with them, not what to call let's say discussing bilateral discussions, having some bilateral discussion with them, so that this actually process can be also complement or included in the hybrid approach which they're using for the regularization process that are taking place. And the other thing is also, of course, the issue of for me, I would say that there's already some funding which comes from the World Bank, and it's probably, if we have some bilateral discussion with the World Bank, discussing with them about how we can anchor this process into the existing already hybrid process which is ongoing, then probably that is the way forward to go on it. But of course, we also noted, however, that we need some capacity building. That is an issue which is very important, not only at the national level, even from Temeke municipality. We can see this was only one settlement, we can say one ward. But we thought probably if we could actually upscale or replicate this in another place so that it is widely understood at the municipal level, that was important, central. At the municipality, we thought probably what we could do is also have a bilateral discussion, continue with bilateral discussion with the municipality. The mayor is very supportive in terms of the political will, and even the municipal director. So we will think that we could actually approach them and probably replicate this process in another settlement, which are the ones which actually were left out because we could not do it in 3 or 4 settlements. And I think that is where we could go and discuss. And it might be that they can allocate some money from their own municipal coffers. It's not offers, and it's not necessarily probably come out. That is what I will add there. The other thing is that we have already discussed this, and we saw that in order to replicate this or to make sure that it goes forward, we need to have some workshops. After going to Nepal, we found actually they have already run some national workshops, which is inviting all the people from the different institutions, discussing at the national level and the municipalities, which we have not done in our case. So for the case of Dar es Salaam, we could actually arrange a workshop where we could have all the 5 municipalities discussing about this approach and tool, so that they also know what is on. And these are things which probably can be organized at the university level and also at the municipal level or city level, what we call the 5 municipalities. Of course, they will probably need some support from there, but I think because we have the capacity now, probably that is something, an opportunity which we can grab, starting from I can say from the local, the municipality, going to at the city level, which is the metropolitan level, and then going to national level.
Thank you so much, Tatu and Kyessi. I guess your statements highlight this continuous nature of engaging towards impact, and the fact that these engagements, they need to be led locally, that we need to have more tools and strategies to move beyond the boundaries of externally funded projects, so we can achieve sustainable urban development in participatory and risk-informed ways in a continuous way. And this doesn't end with Tomorrow Cities. This is yours for you to take forward, and that's amazing. So thank you so much for this pleasant and rich conversation. I always learn so much from you. And I would like to conclude this podcast episode touching on this topic of informality that we discussed in the beginning, and the challenges of engaging in long-term future planning in contexts where informality poses challenges. So it kind of creates a limit for our ability to plan for the future, right? And at the same time, this is a trend. This is a phenomenon that is very it marks so many cities worldwide. So we need to have conversations about it, and we need to engage with it. So in Tomorrow Cities, we have this advantage of working with those different future urban scenarios and testing decisions in spaces that are safe, with communities and institutional actors for improved learning. We talked about that a lot today. But now, thinking of the African context more broadly, and the present and future challenges of African cities, including Dar es Salaam, of course, I would like to finish with very brief statements from you that reflect your experience as professionals, as practitioners, as academics. What are your views regarding how to deal with informality if we want to break cycles of risk accumulation with equity through these future methods? Should we try to assume that there is no informality in the future? Is that part of the logics for testing ideas of good future cities? Or should we work through the logics of informality? Should we embrace the lessons of informality, so the creative strategies that emerge from informality? So how to engage with informality in African context, in the context of Dar es Salaam? What are your thoughts regarding that topic? So if you can finish with short statements, your personal views on that, that would be quite helpful for us. Thank you very much.
I'm not an urban planner, but if I look into what we did with the TCDSE process, and if I look on the situations in our country, for instance, like the cities like Dar es Salaam and the rest, most of the areas have already been developed, especially when you talk about the urban areas. And if you think about the TCDSE process, you could say that it's much more appropriate in virgin areas, virgin lands. It could be very easy to do it. But then if you look at the areas we have, definitely we have to go to areas which are already settled. So we have to structure the method so much so that it captures our local situation, which is informalities which are already existing. And the way I'm seeing into it, that the informalities are still continuing, and most of the areas even the areas which were not informal by then, but people have already settled. So my comment would be, or my suggestion would be, looking into informal areas and getting to see how we can suit the method in the existing informalities which we have.
Thank you, Guido. Any thoughts from Tatu or Kyessi?
If I may add on to what Guido was saying, again, I also agree that we should not fight informality. That is our African urban reality. but I think we need to be more proactive than reactive. We need to work with the residents, with the people. We don't need to impose top-down approaches, but for instance, the TCD-SE approach is very bottom-up, and it has shown that when you embrace the lives of the residents, their practices, the knowledge that they have, then you can come up with plans that are more relevant and more local or rather context sensitive. So it's important just to work with the residents like the way the TCD-SE process has done.
Thank you, Tatu. I really appreciate that statement. We shouldn't fight informality, but we need to be proactive. I think that summarizes quite well the ethos of this engagement, doesn't it? Kyessi, would you like to complement with a few words before we finish?
Yes, only two things I'd like to compliment is that what we have learned from Mianzini is that yes, it is informal, but actually you can work with the informal people. And that is what we learned from the working with the people there. We can come out with solutions. And one of the major solutions which I'm getting out of the Mianzini is the issues of what we call guided informality, guided informal development. When you have a plan which is also looking at the risk in future, because the people, they want a modern city, Mianzini, they want a modern town. And the modern town cannot just come without the actually coming out with these issues, applying these processes and working with them. That is an area which I would say probably those areas which have already been developed, we can actually work with them. And for me, I say, as Dr. Tatu just put that, we cannot fight with it because the funding, the money, and everything is not there. So for me, I think probably informality will continue, but we can actually, through this approach, TCD approach, we can actually guide the processes. But on the other side, the second point which I wanted to say that in new areas, which are in the peri-urban areas, new areas, this approach could also preempting what will happen in future if we don't actually think about the risks. So in the areas which are new, we can call them not very new, but I think the peri-urban areas, the area which have not so much dense, we can apply the methods where we can come out with livable, what called new sites in the areas, and that will actually, for me, I say it's a way of curbing further growth of informality in the peri-urban areas. Those are my 2 points I wanted to share.
Thank you so much. It has been a real pleasure. I learned so much from you. That was amazing. Such a rich conversation, really. I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for your time, Kyessi, Tatu, Guido. And thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. And thank you for this journey that we have been through together. Asante sana. I hope that whoever is at home or having a walk or doing the dishes, whatever you're doing while listening to the podcast, that you enjoy listening to our work in Dar es Salaam and to the challenges and opportunities that we're seeing for purposeful, future-oriented change in risk-informed and participatory ways. So thank you so much, everyone. So if we can just say a goodbye to everyone who's...
Bye-bye. Thank you, Thaisa.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
As you may have noticed, due to technical issues, Professor Wilbard Kombe couldn't participate in this episode. But soon, we will be recording an interview to hear his extensive experience in working in this part of the globe. For more information on the project, visit tomorrowcities.org and follow us on X, LinkedIn, and YouTube.